Awesome. I'm just going to share my screen now. And we basically left off talking about, position, the position property. And with position, you can create relative. And if you create absolute in with relative, so because absolute basically adapts to the parent element if the parent element is relative. So let's say I set the height of the parent element to, let's say, 300 pixels, okay? And the width to 500 pixels, right? You can see that our top right has fixed to the parent container, right? And not to the body, right? So that's the cool thing about absolute. It sticks to the parent container. And then I can even do some cool things like, I could do right of 50% to put it in the middle. And then I could do top of 50% to put it in the absolute middle of that component, I'm just going to make this 200 VH again, right? And you can see that our element is still in the middle of the 200 VH. All right. And then if I remove absolute, right, it'll go back to where it is, right? It'll go back to that first position. If I remove the absolute property, it's just going to go back to how it was now. All right. So similar to absolute relative, it allows you to fit and position elements relative to the parent component. But we need to specify the parent component as relative, because if we don't do that, it's going to take it as static. And on static, you cannot organize elements as we would like to, right? So for example, now let's say I want to make child 3 or child 1 over here fixed, right? So if I do this child 1, if I make it fixed, wherever I scroll, it's going to still be there, right? It's still going to stay at the top, okay? And that's the thing about using fixed, right? It stays at the top, okay? And then on top of that, you can use sticky as well. So I think, obviously, like if you guys want to style this again, you can just use width of 100, and you can 100%, and then you can make it fill the whole thing. And then you can even just add some margin top of like 20 pixels or 25 pixels, and you can have your element fixed at the top there, right? But that's fixed. Okay, now let's say like let's assume that we want 1 to actually be our header, right? I'm just going to remove that, and I want this to be sticky now, right? So it's going to be sticky, okay? And then when I say top 0, the moment it hits top 0, that's when it's going to be sticky to the top of the element, right? So why I say top 0 is because, let me explain this better. So let's say I want to make 3 our sticky element, such that whenever we scroll down, it stays at the top, right? What we would do is on child 3 over here, I can just make this position sticky, right? I'm just going to comment those out right now. And I can just make it top 0. So when it's on top 0, right? Like right now, it's not going to work. Like it's not going to be sticky. But the moment this child 3 has a top of 0, top of 0 basically means from the top of the window, right? It's going to stick at the top. So you can see that it's stuck at the top, right? And we can add the exact same styling to child 2, right? So that when it's child 2, it stays at the top. And then when it's child 3, it goes down to the bottom, right? So that's the cool thing about using sticky, my personal favorite, right? So that's pretty much it, guys, with position. It's as simple as that. Like it really just helps. And I think it just really helps to know this stuff. Like, when the position is relative, you can set a position absolute in one of the children. And when one of the children is absolute, you can actually style those items. You can use top, bottom, left, right, and you can style them accordingly, right? And then you can use fixed if you want to fix it in a certain position. For example, fixed is actually useful for like, let's use child 2 for that, right? So if I say position fixed, right? Again, it's going to do this thing. And then I'm just going to say from the top, right? I want it to be 50% from the top. So it's going to be over here. So normally you'll see this on a lot of websites. There's going to be like a WhatsApp icon over here, and that's just going to be there. And then if you click on that icon, it's going to open up the page, right? So that's a use case for it, right? So that could always be there. And then you can see our header there is sticky. you know, and as we scroll down, it remains there, right? And we can do the same thing, like for, we can, like anytime, let's say you want to have a fixed component on like, you know, the right-hand side of your page. Let's say we want to make, we create a separate div, right? And we want it to be fixed on the page, no matter wherever you scroll, right? That item stays fixed on that page. That's when sticky is useful. So when it hits the top of 0, it becomes fixed, right? And then it scrolls down. And then when it's not 0, right? When it's not 0, for example, right now in my position, in my in this element right now, top is not 0 for 3. Top has some value right now, right? The moment I scroll like this and top becomes 0, it becomes sticky, right? But before it becomes sticky and top is not 0, the position is relative, right? The moment it becomes 0, the position becomes fixed. So that's the thing with sticky. Sticky is like a combination of fixed and relative, all right? Cool. So that's about it, guys, with positions. As simple as that, and it's as straightforward as that. Nothing too complicated. I hope that makes sense. If that made sense, please type a yes in the chat. If it did not make sense, please type no, and maybe I can like help you guys understand things better. Cool. So as you guys can see, you know, CSS is not that bad. It's like really, really cool. It's just with a lot of practice, it's just going to get so much more easier. Definitely easier than Java, eh? Cool. Cool. So I think we can move on to the next part now. So I'm just going to, again, leave these different components over here, right? I can comment this out because there's no comments in between. And I'm just going to say that this is position stuff, right? And then I'm going to come over here now and I'm just going to comment that out as well. And I'll call this position. Sanya is like, is it weird that I still prefer Java? Don't worry, Sanya. I know Java has like, you know, once you get a hang of Java, it's tough to let go of it. But once you go to JavaScript, you're going to feel so good. So just hang on. Like I know HTML, CSS can get a bit tedious. Once you do the JavaScript stuff, it becomes like a lot more fun. At least that's from my personal experience. Cool. So now let's continue, right? So we're going to move on to the next part right now, and we're going to talk about CSS units, all right? So in CSS units, you guys have constantly asked this question, like, you know, what should I use? Should I use percentage? Should I use VH, VW, EM, REM, you know, PX, the pixel value? Like, what is all this stuff? Like, why is this so confusing? Let me break it down for you guys. It's actually not that complicated, all right? So what I'll do now is I'll just create a few more divs. So I'm just going to call this, let's see, CSS units. And inside this, I'm just going to create a div, and I'm going to call, so I'm not going to create a div. I'm just going to create a style, right? And I'm going to call it, let's say, let's see how I can do this. So I'm just going to say 50 px, right? So I'm going to create a, let's call it 100 px, okay? So 100 px. So this will make more sense, guys. Just give me a second while I do this. And then inside over here, I'm just going to have percentage value. So let's see, 50%, okay? 50%, okay? And then inside, and then I'm going to have a parent element, right? And inside the parent element, I'm going to have the same items again, okay? But I'm just going to style the parent element now. So now, guys, I'm just going to show you, like, you know, how the hell does this pixel value and percentage value work, right? So the first thing is we need to create a style for, let's see, for 100 px. So I'm just going to copy that, 100 pixels, and the width is just going to be 100 pixels, okay? Then I'm just going to create another one for 50%, whereas the width is just going to be 50%, right? And what I'll do is I'm just gonna add some padding. Okay, padding top and bottom, I want it to be like 20 pixels. And then padding left and right, I want it to be 0 because we're dealing with widths right now. I want to give you a demonstration on that. I'm going to call this 100 pixels. I'm going to call this 50%. Okay, I'm going to add some background now to each thing. So I'm just going to say background color, red, right? And I'm going to say, I'm just going to make all of them red. Cool. And actually, let us just add some margin bottom. Maybe another 10 pixels. And right over here, we also have the same styles that are being implemented in parent, right? So what I'll do for parent, I'm just going to create parent. I'm just going to set a border of, let's say 2 pixels, and I'm going to make it black. I'm going to make it solid, right? And you can see it's right there. And inside that, I'm just going to have, let's make the width specific. So like 500 pixels width. So it's like 500 pixels width, and then I'm just going to add a margin top. Actually, let's just add margin all around of 10 pixels. Cool. Great. So now inside over here, inside our 50% as well, I'm just going to add the padding. So it looks a bit more, let's make it maybe 15 pixels. Yeah. And I'm going to do the same thing over here. Cool. And then now you guys can see, right? So basically, I've made this 100 pixels, right? I've made one div 100 pixels, and I've made one div 50%, okay? And I've created a container, okay? And basically, if you look carefully, right now we have these two divs that are not inside any div. They're just inside the body, this body, right? So they're just out there. So whatever values we have over here, right? The 100 pixels, the 50%, it's all relative to the body, okay? And body is like the root right now, okay? So basically 100 pixels stays the same inside both of these boxes. So just to make that a little more clear, what I'll do is I'm gonna style my body as well. And to style body, you don't have to use the dot, right? This dot selector. And I'm just gonna say 10 pixels as well. Oh, sorry, margin. Okay, so it looks a bit more to the right. Okay, so now you can see that we have, and there's also a 12 pixel bottom. We're gonna get 12 pixels. Okay, it's happening because the margin is being applied again over here. But the point is that, let me just remove margin. Let me just keep margin top over here. Yeah, so that's all in the same line, basically. That's what I want to see. So you can see that inside this div over here, the parent div, we have these two divs, which are just reusing the same classes, okay? And then we have 100 pixels and 50%. You can see that the 50% that is out here in the parent, right, relative to the body, that's 50% of the width of the screen. Now, if I change the size of my window, right, you can see that the 50% value changes, right? But the other 50% stays the same, right? That's because the 50% that is out here is relative to the body. And the body is basically that HTML document. And as we change the screen size, that body value changes. So the 50% value is a relative value, right? But inside this div over here, we have a fixed width of 500 pixels, right? But that stays the same. That stays the same throughout. And that's why the width of the 50% width inside that div does not change. It stays the same. That's because it's relative to that parent element, okay? But if you observe the 100 pixels, the 100 pixels stays the same because that's the absolute value. Regardless of the screen size, whatever, the 100 pixels will stay 100 pixels, right? So the percentage value becomes relative to the screen size, right? Or relative to the parent element rather, okay? So that's pretty much it with the percentages. Tobile, is this not an example of styling nested divs? Yeah, definitely. This is an example of styling nested divs. But the only difference is that, guys, like when you're styling your divs and you want to style nested divs, like you could just directly put your styles like I did right now. I just threw all the styles in like this. right? But then if you want to style, like, you know, if you want to have a specific style for these innermost divs, right? Let's say I say test, okay? And I want to style that innermost div. What I'll do is I could just do test, right? And I want to just change the background color for this to yellow, right? So what it'll do is that this element inside parent only is going to change to yellow. And that's because I've added the test class over here, okay? Now, if I just add parent over here, okay? Now it's going to look for parent, and then inside parent, it's going to find a test. And if it finds a test there, it's going to change it, okay? Now, if I create a different div, and I call this parent2, you'll see that this style did not change because it only looked for parent and then it styled that innermost element. So that's how you style nested divs basically, right? You just have to say, like, when you specify the first element outside here, it's going to look for anything inside it, okay? And it even doesn't have to be, you don't even have to worry about levels, right? Like, let's say you have, like, you know, a whole bunch of levels in, like, if I remove test over here and then I just add a whole bunch of divs within, this is gonna really mess up our styles for demo purposes. And I just add test there. You'll see that it only picked that test. Like, you don't even have to worry about the leveling. Like over here, if I don't have to do, you know, dot parent dot 100 pixels. I don't have to do that. I have to just do dot parent test, and it's gonna find that test class anywhere inside. Like, it doesn't matter the level of nesting, and it's just gonna style that element. All right. So that's basically how the styling of nested divs also works, right? Very simple, very, very simple. Cool. So that's basically the difference between dealing with, you know, percentages and dealing with pixel values, right? So that's all well and good, but then it gets slightly more complicated when we're dealing with EM and REMs. Actually, let's also touch on VW and VH, right, in the same example. So over here, I'm just going to also add the same thing, where I'm just going to say 50 VW. Okay, I'll change this to 50 VW. And I'll come over here in my styles, and I actually don't think this will work. I need to say 50 like this. And I'm just going to style it over here. 50 VW, and I'm just going to say width has to be 50 VW. Okay. And I'm just going to apply the same styles of, let's see, 50% here. Right. So you can see that, let me just save this file. And let's add some margin top, margin bottom. Awesome. So you can see that the 50 VW view width, right? It just takes, it's similar to the 50%, but it's not using the body now, it's using the screen size, right? You can see that's why there's a small difference, because body has some additional padding, but this is VW directly uses the screen size, the viewport, right? So 50 VW stays the same over there, right? Now, let's say I do 50 VW inside my parent. What do you think is going to happen here? Can I have a volunteer, please? If I do 50 VW here and I save this file, like, how will the position be styled? Will it stay the same, or will it be relative to the parent container? Cool. Absolutely right. Exactly, Lonwabo, you're right on. It will be the same. So if I save that file, you'll see that the width is the same. It doesn't change, right? Although if I change the screen size, it'll change, right? But then essentially, at the end of the day, it doesn't care about the parent element, because VW only works with the screen size, all right? So that's the difference, okay? The 50% works relative to the parent element. Right now, the parent of this is body. The 50% here works relative to the parent element, which is parent, right? 100 pixels, the absolute value stays the same. Similarly, 50 view width uses the screen size, and it does the same thing as 50%, but then relative to the screen size. Okay, it's quite similar for the height. So let's also just do the height. Okay, I'm just gonna keep it 50 as well. VH, VH, and I'm also just gonna add the same thing inside here so that you guys can see the comparison. And now I'm just gonna add some additional styles. And I'm gonna change that to VH. And it actually has to be height. Because remember, VH, H stands for height, W stands for width, right? So if I save that, now you can see that what VH does is it fills the entire container and it puts the height there, right? It puts the height to the 50% of the screen, right? And then if you look here, 50 VH, it fills the parent container, but then it uses the height to 50%. Is percentage and VH, VW used for more responsive design? Definitely, I would agree with that. I do think that you should get used to the habit of using VH, VW, even when you're just coding normally. Try to use pixel values as less as possible. I mean, there are some points where like it's negligible, like, you know, for example, margin left 10 pixels, that's perfectly fine, because regardless of the screen size, 10 pixels is not much, you know. So in those instances, using pixel values is totally fine. But then if you can avoid using it, right, just avoid using it. You know, for example, like font sizes, stick to using REM values. I mean, we'll get to that. And I'll also give you guys recommendations on what the best approach is, right? But VH is really helpful, guys. I think it's really cool because it fills the parent container. So it fills the parent container entirely over here, and it stays at the same height, but it fills the whole width, you know? So that's really cool. This is something that could be useful for responsive design as well. So you can see as I'm making my screen smaller over here, the body stays the same, right? The height stays the same, but the width changes completely, you know? So that's the cool thing about VH. That's the only difference, right? But the main thing, guys, just to summarize, 100 pixels stays the absolute value. So 100 pixels did not change in the body, and 100 pixels did not change when there's a parent, right? And then here, 50% changes relative to the parent element, which is the body. So 50% changes as the body size changes, right? And then 50 VW is the same as 50% in this instance, but VW is using the screen size, so it's doing 50% of the screen, right? And the VW doesn't care about parent elements. VW only works with the screen size. So you can see that here it pops out of the element because it doesn't care. It just works with the screen size, okay? And VH basically works with the screen height, the height of the screen. So it's going to calculate the screen size, right? The screen height, and it's going to do 50% of that, and it's going to put that in the div, okay? And basically the same thing inside this. The one thing that you have to take away with the VH, right, is basically you can use VH for you know, spreading out the entire component. So it does care about the parent component in that it will fill that entire space in the parent component, but the height stays the same. The height stays the same in the body and the parent element, but the width fills completely. The width becomes basically 100% by default. Okay, so that's basically the four different sizes that we've done right now. Now we're just going to cover EM, REM, and then percentage with fonts. So what I'll do is I'm just going to comment this stuff out for now. I'm just going to call this PX percent VW VH, and I'm going to come down here and I'm going to create new divs now, right? I'm just going to create new divs for basically styling and getting our font sizes, right? So let's do this. So we basically have one REM, right? And then one EM. So I just want to show you guys a comparison between EM and REM, right? So let me just do this. EM and REM. And I'll do the exact same thing, but I'll add 2, right? So we can see the difference, okay? And then I'm going to have another parent element, right? Let's see, can I remove these styles? I'm just going to temporarily remove these styles. And now in my parent element, what I'll do is I'm just going to add the same stuff. All right. So I'm just going to save that. It's probably going to look really bad. And oh yeah, nothing counts because we haven't actually added any text. One EM, one REM, and then two EM, two REM. I'm going to copy that again. Okay, and then you'll see that everything appears as with one font size because we haven't changed it, and this is the default font size. All right. So if I actually inspect that, let's see what the default font size is. Okay, I think it's not giving us the default, but it's normally about like 16 pixels, 14, 16 pixels. Yeah, cool. So basically what we'll do now is we're going to play around with EM stuff, right? So I'm just going to create all the styles for this now. So I'm going to say one EM, and then I'm just going to set the font size, right, to one EM. All right, and I'll do the same thing with REM, and then let's see what happens on the screen. So you can see that nothing happens, like it stays the same, right? It stays the exact same. Okay. Now let's do two EM and two REM, right? So I'm just going to copy this and change that to 2, right? And then you can see that hold on a sec. Oh yeah, I need to just change this to 2 and then 2 here. Yeah, now you can see that it has changed, like the font sizes have changed, but still EM is still equal to REM, right? Now inside my parent, right? Let me just grab my parent class over here. Probably going to reuse the styles there, right? Perfect. So you can see that one EM, one REM, two EM, two REM are the exact same. But now over here, I'm just going to add a font size for the parent element. And I'm going to say that the parent element has to be like 20 pixels. Okay, right? Or let's say I make the parent element 40 pixels. Okay, you can see that the one REM, one EM, two EM, two REM totally changed, right? Basically what's happening now is that one EM is going to equal to 40 pixels. Two REM is going to equal to 40 pixels. Two EM is going to equal to 2 times 40 pixels, because now it's going to use the relative element, right? That's what EM does. EM uses the relative element, whereas REM uses the root, only the root, right? So in the root, I'm just going to set a font size as well here to, let's say, 14 pixels, right? And there you go. You can see that basically what's happening now is we have all our different sizes, right? And now EM changes relative to whatever size we specify in the parent element here. Okay, so I'm actually having, I think there's a small issue. The 2EM should actually only be relative to the root element. So there's something I'm missing. Yeah, that's because I have only put REM over here. Yeah, so this makes more sense, right? Cool. So basically what's happening, just to recap, right? I set the size over here to 14 pixels. So that's going to be the root font size, 14 pixels. And in the parent, right? In the parent, I set the font size to 40 pixels. So this div over here, which has this black border, is going to have 40 pixel size, okay? When I do one EM, right, it's not going to look at the root size that we have here. Similar to percentage, EM is the same as percentage, right? Because EM uses the parent component to set the style. So basically, the parent component has 40 pixels. So in our child component over here, one EM is going to be relative to the parent font size, which is 40 pixels. That's why it looks that big. Whereas one REM, right, it doesn't care about the parent. The full form of, I mean, I'm not sure what EM stands for, but the R stands for root, right? The root means that in the root we specified 14 pixels. So one REM is just going to be 14 pixels. Two REM is going to be 28 pixels, right? But here, two REM is going to be 80 pixels. One EM is going to be 40 pixels, because EM is relative to the parent component, whereas REM is relative to the root font size. All right. So that's pretty much it. Like that's the difference between, you know, VW, percentage pixels, and then EM and REM. Right. And you can also use this with padding. Like, you know, when you're setting padding values, you can set the padding using these values, REM and EM. It'll use the root font size value. Yeah. Cool. So I hope that makes sense with regards to the CSS units. Recommendations, basically, guys, I recommend that you stick with using REM values mostly, because if you use EM values, it can get very confusing, because it'll look at the parent element, and sometimes let's say, like, you know, we have like a 4 EM value over here for this parent. Any child value is going to be relative to that font size, and we don't want that happening, right? We want to just focus on using the root sizes, because there's only a few font sizes you'll deal with in any application. You're going to have like a title, subtitle, probably going to have like fancy styles that might have different font sizes. And that's why I think it's just better to use REM, because it's more constant. EM is more relative. So definitely don't recommend to use EM for fonts, right? Recommend to use REM for fonts, so that, let's say you're doing mobile optimization, you just change the root font size, and then everything will change. And then anything that requires specific styling for like mobile optimization, you can just use media queries for that. And then you can also use, I think EM makes more sense to use if you're like relative to this div, right? If you want to do some sort of styling, like with padding and stuff, you can use EM values for that. Let's say you want your padding to be 14 pixels. Or let's say you have some child elements that are relative to the size of the parent, then you could use EM for that. But in my personal experience, I've rarely used EM, guys. I mainly just focus on using REM for font sizes and percentage values for any time I'm dealing with divs and images and stuff like that. So those are my recommendations. Obviously, now you should understand the concepts, and you guys can pretty much figure out what you're more comfortable with. But I find myself using percentage much more. Like a lot of the times I use percentage. I also use VH a lot. VW not so much, because I just tend to use percentage, right? And of course, pixel value, I use it quite frequently just to separate art elements next to each other. I mean, like for small values, like, 10 pixels and stuff, it's not much of a big deal. So yeah, definitely recommend that. The cool thing is, when we move on to advanced web dev, we'll probably look into SCSS. In SCSS, you can create variables. And when you create variables, you can store specific font sizes in variables, so that, let's say, like, your spacing will be consistent across all different components. And let's say you want spacing across all components to be 10 pixels, right? You don't have to change 10 pixels in multiple places. You could just use variables. And you can even do that in CSS using that root command. But yeah, in SCSS, it's much more comfortable creating variables and stuff. Sick. Cool. So guys, I hope this concept is made much more clear now. The CSS units, I hope this brings a lot of clarity to you guys. Please drop a yes in the chat if you have understood all the concepts on CSS units. Please drop a no, or let us know, like, you can unmute yourself if you have a question, if something doesn't make sense. Great. Awesome. Cool. So I guess we can move on to the next part now, which is using media queries. Um, so basically, guys, with media queries, the point of media queries is to have breakpoints, right? So like when you're changing the screen size, like, people have different sized computers, people have different sized tablets, different sized mobiles, and like if you just create one screen, one thing on like the web, and people start sharing links on their phones, things are going to, like, your website might break. The components, some items might overlap the other, your fonts might look a bit ugly. So that's why media queries are extremely important. It's used for styling elements in a specific sized windows, right? So I think I also dropped, yeah, the different breakpoints. So you have like a desktop, which would be like between, if you want to build like a web application, like a website, like the web view, like something that you would view on your computer, right? That would be between, like, 768 pixels to 1200 pixels, right? So you can see over here for desktop or laptop, the max width should be 1200 pixels, the minimum width should be 768 pixels. And then for like tablets, it could be between 768 pixels and the minimum width could be 480 pixels. And then for mobile devices, it could be 480 pixels. So yeah, guys, I think this is just something that you have to sort of just keep in mind in all your projects. Recommend that you just keep this line of code in your CSS file so that you can do some mobile optimization. I mean, a responsive, you can like build responsive applications, because you've got to make your app look good on all devices. And as a developer, you want people to enjoy using your product. So it's really important that you're aware of these media queries and all these different breakpoints. So I recommend that you take screenshots, put this snippet in your CSS files, so that when you're doing mobile optimization, you are optimizing for desktops, laptops, tablets, mobile devices. Normally, desktop and laptop is kind of similar. That's why we sort of just skipped laptop over here, 1024 pixels. So that's why we went straight from max width of 1200 pixels to 768 pixels. And then for tablet and mobile, these are the different ranges to work with. So we'll actually do a small demo on it. Hopefully that'll make sense. So yeah, so these are just the different options that you have when you're using media queries. So we'll get to all these different options. Let's actually do a demo, right? So let me just comment that out, and I'm just going to call this, I think I already gave a title up here. Okay, I didn't. CSS units. Cool. And underneath over here, I'm just gonna, let's actually go to HTML. And yeah, we can remove this stuff for now. So yeah, guys, if you ever want to just like, re-understand your concepts, this code is going to be up. You can always use it. You can always refer to it. And now I think let us just work on doing some media queries, right? So with media queries, let's keep it really simple, okay? So we're just going to create h1. I'm going to say title. I'm going to say h2 subtitle. I'm just going to add a class called title, and I'm going to add a class called subtitle so I can style these elements. And then in here, I'm just going to create a style called title, and I'm going to make title like 6 font size, 6 rem, and I'm going to make subtitle font size maybe 4 rem or 3 rem, right? Cool. Then what we'll do now is we're just going to use our tool over here, our developer tools. So when I inspect, right, it'll open these developer tools. And whenever you want to test for responsiveness, always just, you can click on this icon over here, which will allow you to toggle to this different state, right? So it's right over here next to this elements. There's this thing that looks like mobile devices. It says toggle device toolbar. If I click on that, it takes me to this view, right? If I move this slightly down now, you can see that I can readjust the height, I can readjust the width, I can play around with this, okay? Cool. So basically when you're using media queries, you have different options, right? You can create media queries for screen, like, so this will be specifically desktop devices, phones, screens, and then you can also create for print. So print basically means when I do Control P, right here, you can see whatever appears in your print over here, right? You can also style this. You can use media queries to style whatever you want printed. So for example, let's actually create our first media query now. Basically, to create a media query, you have to type media, right? So that will allow CSS to understand that you're about to type a media query. And then inside your media query now, like you can start typing the different commands, right? So there's screen, and then there's print, and then there's also speech, right? We're just gonna demo print real quick, and you just open brackets, right? And once you do that, you basically be able to add styles within this, right? So let's say once you're inside print, you want your body to be color red, right? So if I save that, you'll see that right now the color is still black, right? But now if I just print my page, right? If I just want to, let me just use the shortcut, Control P. You'll see that when we're printing, the color becomes red. So that's a cool thing you can do with mobile optimize, like even like with the media queries, you can use that print command to actually style what you want your stuff to look like when it's printed. I've never used this in my past projects, but you never know. You might have a unique use case when you're working with someone at a specific company, and that might create some sort of a, like, as long as you know this, like you have to just understand that it's possible to do that. Now we'll just create normal media queries. So if I just do media all, so this is going to apply to everything, because that's what most of the times will be used, right? You can say all, and then you have to say and. You have to always use the and keyword whenever you want to specify, additional properties, right? And then you use brackets. And let's see what different stuff we had over here. So let's say now we want to style our application for mobile devices, right? I want to style it for mobile devices over here. What I'll do is I'll set max width, right, to 400 pixels, 480 pixels, and then I'll open curly brace like that. Now, whatever styles I add in here will only apply to this, to a max width of 480 pixels. So let's see. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to make the color red, but right now you see our color is still black. It won't work, right? That's because we said that these styles have to be applied until a max width of 480 pixels. So if I reduce this thing to below 480 pixels, that's when it works. So it goes on, it applies these styles until a maximum size of 480 pixels, right? 480 pixels. And the moment I cross it, it's gone. Like the styles will not be applied anymore, right? So that's a cool thing with mobile optimization. You can literally style specifically for what you're looking for. Now, let's say I want to style for, for tablets, right? Let's say you're building some sort of game for a tablet or something, you can add similar media queries. You can just add it down here. You want it to be applied to all. So when like CSS is smart enough to understand that you're referring to all when you just remove that command. And you can just say the max width, you want the max width to be 768 pixels. So 768 pixels, and so you want both conditions to be met. You want min width to be 480 pixels. So this is basically styling for tablets, right? Styling for tablets. And let's say for tablets, you want the body color to be, let's say, blue, right? So you can see that we're in tablet mode right now. It's above 480 pixels, right? And it goes all the way like this until 748 pixels, which is like, the size of a tablet. So you can see like hang on a sec, 768 pixels, my bad. 768 pixels. So you can see that until 768 pixels, it's going to apply all these styles. The moment you cross 768 pixels, it's gone. Like it comes back to our default styling, right? And normally desktop and laptop is what is default. You don't necessarily have to style for that. You can just style for these queries because all these different styles will be applied to web and to, like, desktop applications and laptop applications. And you will probably in most cases want to just rearrange elements slightly in smaller screen sizes. So this will be like for tablets, and this will be for mobile devices. Cool. So that's pretty much it, guys, with media queries. It's as simple as that. So let's say, like, in my mobile device, I want my title to be appearing as, with a font size of, yeah, font size of, rather than 6 rem, you want it to be like maybe 4 rem, slightly smaller. If you do that, you'll see that the size will slightly change. So when we go into mobile, you saw that our title changed. And we can change our subtitle as well, right? We can change our subtitle to maybe 1.5 rem, So you can see in our mobile device, our titles look much more smaller. And then when we go into tablet, it gets bigger. And then bigger device stays the same as tablet, So yeah, guys, that's pretty much it with media queries. It's as simple as that. It's just the same thing. You apply the same CSS styles over here. If you want to modify styles, right, you can refer to those same classes and add new styles. Otherwise, the styles will be the same, right? You're applying the same styles that are in your CSS file, but these styles will only get triggered when the size is specifically between 0 and 480 pixels maximum width, or 480 pixels and 768 pixels maximum width, all right? How do you use it with images? Yeah, no, Nikello, we'll also cover that, but I think my advice is that whenever you're using images and stuff, when you're defining the images itself by default, I recommend that you just use percentages. So let's say you set the width to like 50% of a certain image. If you're on a smaller device, you don't even have to do any mobile optimization. The width will automatically become 50% of the size of that div, And navigation bar, yes, navigation bar is critical, Princess. Like in your mobile device here, your nav bar would totally change. Like your nav bar styles would totally change over here. Maybe firstly you would remove, like, you would have to add like a sidebar and stuff. And you would add all those new styles inside of this over here. And with display flex, yeah, I mean, like you could use images with display flex. Also, like, guys, I think when you use flex wrap, right, with display flex, I think if you just use flex wrap, elements will just go over to the next line, when the screen size becomes smaller. So you don't have to really use media queries for that, right? You could just let elements overflow onto the next line. But maybe you want to add some margin in between the items. So that's when you would use media queries. So it's very context specific, guys. Like you'll be experiencing some issues. Let's say like you show your application on mobile and it looks really, really like bad. That's when you come here and you figure out how you're going to add all this different optimization, right, to make it look better on mobile. Cool. Any other questions? So that's pretty much it, guys, with media queries. Yeah, so all is for above. Speech is for text-to-speech recognition. I've never really used this, but it's there. So if you guys are keen to do some research on that, it'll be cool. And then, yeah, so orientation can also be set using orientation portrait. So for example, if I come over here and I add a new media, right, and I just set orientation to portrait, right? only if it's portrait is going to apply these styles, right? So let's say I want the body and I want background color to be like red. Okay, so you'll see that it's in landscape right now, so it's not going to really work. But the moment it's portrait, it becomes red, right? It becomes completely red. And you can see that when our screen size is smaller like this, our fonts are still there, but it's just red color. And then you can do the same thing with landscape, right? And you can even use and if you want both styles to be applied, but it doesn't make sense, right, to use portrait and landscape. But if it's let's say you want something to be applied in both places. So let me give an example of what I mean, right? So over here, you have the media query and you have max width of 768 pixels and you're using the and operator, minimum width of 480 pixels. So basically these styles are only going to be triggered if the maximum width is between this pixel value and this pixel value. It has to, so both conditions have to be met, right, for this to be successful. So in the instance that you want, like, one or the other to be met, like the or operator, like let's say orientation is portrait, or or the max, let's see, or the min width is minimum width is, let's say, 300 pixels, right? You want these styles to be applied, right? So this is actually not a great example. Let me just change this to, let's see, 500 pixels. Yeah. So if let's say now, like the right now the minimum width is, when the minimum width is 500 pixels, these styles are applied. But as you can see, our orientation is still landscape right now. It's not portrait, but the styles have applied because we've used the or operator over here. So if one condition is true, it'll apply the styles, right? If one of the conditions are true, okay? So now if I go back to portrait, you can see it'll be applied again. So it's in portrait right now, it's applied. Portrait is basically when, like, your height is greater than your width. And landscape is when your width is greater than your height. So you can see that when the width is, let's see, let's make this better. When the width is, when the minimum width is like 600 pixels, right? So it's above 600 pixels. That's when this style will be applied. So let me just save that. So you can see that the moment it's less than 600 pixels, it for a brief moment there, it goes back to default, the default color, which was white. Then we become portrait, and the moment we're portrait, it becomes red again. So yeah, that's basically the power of media queries. I'm just going to say can use orientation and the comma. Let me just say comma as the or operator. So in essence, every change that needs to be made, you would be required to write code in that for that specific size. Exactly. I mean, normally when you're writing your code, if you're using, like, REM, you're using percentages, you're using wrap in the right place, there's just a few modifications you would have to make in mobile devices. And you would have to make those changes inside these media queries. But if this seems like really overwhelming for you guys, just relax, because when we move to Bootstrap, a lot of these things are, like, a lot of time is saved when we use Bootstrap, because the elements, Bootstrap allows you to build for responsiveness from scratch. So when you create a div, you can create a responsive div by just adding a few classes in your code. So, but like, this is important to understand, because let's say you work at a company that doesn't use Bootstrap, they use raw CSS. You've got to understand these concepts, right? But yeah, that's pretty much it with media queries, guys. Yeah, do you guys have any other questions with regards to media queries? Please type yes if it makes sense. Please type no if you have any question or if it doesn't make sense.
Cool.
Epic, 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 epic. Awesome. You guys are legends. You guys are legends. Yes, Jaden, you'll have access to this. I don't think I've published it on Classroom yet. It is on Classroom, but I haven't published it. So I'll just publish it after this session. So yeah, you guys will have access to it. And you guys will also have access to the code. Cool. So, I mean, I think, Asif, we don't have time to really cover like, the concepts like the Netflix concepts, like, background images, overlaying, position again. And then we also wanted to cover Flexbox, position, picture alignment, styling nested divs as well in the Netflix demo. But I don't think we really have time for that today. So I think we might have to have another session tomorrow. But I think before we end off, we can just talk about vendor prefixes. Cool. So I'm just going to talk about these vendor prefixes now, right? So I mean, you guys don't get scared looking at this hectic word vendor prefixes. It's not that deep. It's just something that you have to be aware of. The thing is, CSS has been developed for a long time now. And the thing about development is that you're developing in different environments, right? So sometimes some styles that you apply in your Chrome might not work in Internet Explorer. Like when you're writing your CSS styles, it might like you might end up using like some sort of property, like animation property, and it doesn't work on like Mozilla Firefox. Like you've built it for Chrome, and then like you send your app to your friend, and your friend looks at it in Mozilla Firefox, and then they're like, oh my gosh, what the hell? Like this app is not working, right? I'm getting this weird error. Those happen because of compatibility issues, some support issues, because of all these different development environments. So that's when vendor prefixes come in. And vendor prefixes are really simple. It's as simple as this. So like, let's say I'm in my grid container over here, and I am doing justify content, right? Justify content center and align content center. Let's say there's some support issue and it's not able to recognize, like Mozilla is not able to recognize this particular command, this justify content. All I have to do is I have to use this keyword over here, moz, right? So I just have to do dash moz dash, and then that becomes a vendor prefix. So now this will specifically work in Mozilla Firefox, right? Now you guys might be wondering, okay, now like when will I ever come across this problem? That's why I've put this link over here. Personally, in my experience, I've never really had a problem like because this is like a problem from the olden days. Like with the code nowadays, like most browsers always support the issues. Like Chrome, Firefox are normally like all these different CSS properties work in all these browsers most of the times. If anything, only Internet Explorer sometimes might give a few issues, right? But otherwise it works in all the different browsers properly, okay? And you can see that the different browsers that you need to be aware of are Safari, Chrome, Android browsers, iOS browsers, and then MS is Internet Explorer, O is for Opera, MOZ is for Firefox, MOZ is for Firefox. So basically, if you come over here, right? Let's say that you're researching about a specific component. I'm not sure if there's a specific component. Let's see, border style. Okay, I'm basically trying to find something that an instance where you would have to use this vendor prefix. But as I said, like nowadays, such problems don't really exist. This is like more of a problem of the olden days, where things work in one browser and doesn't work in other browsers. But yeah, normally, like if you ever stuck, I recommend that you come over here to this browser list. It's very context specific again. Like, let's say you want to do some sort of justify content, right? What you would do here is you just come to J, justify content, right? And you can see that these are the latest versions in which this works. So it works in Internet Explorer 11, Mozilla 28, works in Firefox 9, Chrome 9, so Safari 9, Chrome 29, and Opera Mini 17. Basically, these are the different, these are the last versions in which this was working. So it was in those days when like the moment we hit version 28 of Mozilla, this justify content was working. That's what it means, right? So you can see that justify content works across all browsers. And then if you click into it, you'll be able to see that it totally works fine. Like there's no, like normally if there's some sort of issue, they will tell you specifically that you need to use WebKit or you need to use Moz or whatever. So you can see that for any Chrome that has like version 21 to 29, you need to use WebKit, right? For any version of Mozilla between 18 and 28, you need to use Moz, right? So it'll tell you exactly, like, depending on the property that you're dealing with. But nowadays, like, I'm not even sure what version of Chrome we are on right now. But I'm sure these issues are going to be very, very context specific. I don't think you guys will really experience this unless, you get some sort of like someone informs you about it. It's rarely, like in my experience, I've never used a vendor prefix, right? I mean, I've never had to, because I'm mostly just building React components and reusing libraries that already exist. So I've never really experienced this issue. But I think if you ever experience this, you know that vendor prefixes exist, and you just have to add this extra prefix before that particular thing. So for example, let's say you want this to work in Mozilla, you would add Moz, justify content center. But before doing that, even, it has to be justify content center first. And then you can add, for Mozilla, you want it to work justify content center. You want it to work for Opera. You want it to work for Microsoft. And then you also want it to work on Safari. You want it to work on all the different devices, Safari, Android, iOS, and that's when you use WebKit, right? So yeah, that's pretty much it, guys. Like it's really not that deep with the vendor prefixes, but I hope you're aware of this. So you use the vendor prefix to make sure it works on that browser in case it's not supported. Exactly, Antefetse. You just, like, sometimes there might be issues in different browsers, and that's why, like, people experience bugs. You can never build a bug-free application because someone will experience an error in a weird context. So, like, as a developer, you just need to be aware that, okay, cool, this could be the problem. Like, I don't think there's a vendor prefix added to my CSS, so I'm just going to fix it with that. So Tobilia says that I code on my phone, and I can definitely say that WebKits have serious glitches on Android. Yeah, I think that's because, actually not sure. It depends on the browser. Like on Android, you can use Chrome as well, so maybe that would make things better. Yeah, but that's about it, guys, with vendor prefixes. We'll probably get into the Netflix demo tomorrow. So tomorrow we're just going to cover the Netflix demo. And then actually, there's a few more things that we have to cover. I want, basically, Luyanda needs to go through the div structure, the timeline component in the Zayo application. And then we'll also do the Netflix demo. So I think tomorrow we can start off the session by Luyanda covering the div structure, timeline component from the Zayo app. And then we will cover the Netflix demo, and then we can jump into transitions after that. Cool. So yeah, guys, I think with this knowledge, like you guys are very much equipped to go ahead and work on the YouTube clone. It should be like, things should make a lot more sense now. Like even watching the video that we did, things should make a lot more sense. Just let us know if you have any questions. And yeah, that's pretty much it from my side. Asif, do you have any additions to make? I think Asif is on mute, or Asif is maybe not around his PC right now. But yeah, guys, that's pretty much it for today. Tomorrow, we're just going to type on the group what time to meet tomorrow. And Luyanda, please be prepared for tomorrow. We want you to flex on your amazing solution tomorrow, and you can go through that stuff tomorrow. The thing is, it's like the workday is finished now, so we will have to continue tomorrow.